What are the creepiest urban legends from your area? Story 1. The Slap Ghost. In a village close by, there is the story that, in a specific road through the woods, several guys were being slapped when they passed in a bicycle in the late 70s. Always at night, one of these guys was my grandfather. He was alone and was slapped and fell off his bicycle. No one was there. Several people came home full of bruises and scratches from the bicycle fall after the slap in the face. Suddenly, the slap stopped for a few years, and in the 80s, the ghost came back. One guy was slapped in the face in the same place. What's funny is that the mystery was solved that day. It was a branch from a tree. The old guys from the 70s came home late from the old bar, completely drunk, including my grandfather, and without any source of light, they would get hit by the branch and fall. Then the tree was trimmed, and the slap stopped until it grew again and made this 80s guy the next victim. Lucky him, he was sober and realized what hit him. Story 2. Maxik Kopok. It's a legend about a lady going door to door selling Kopok, a type of cracker. If you refuse to buy any, she releases a Pontianek, a vengeful ghost, into your house. Best solution is not to open the door. Story 3. There used to be an insane asylum by my house in the 70s. It's probably 5 minutes away from my house, if that. But they tore it down in the 90s because it was just a giant eyesore and had a dark history of mistreating patients. There is a cemetery on the property with hundreds of unnamed people who died there. In the early 2000s, Walmart bought the land and wanted to build a Walmart there since you would be able to see it from the highway. They excavated and such, and the day before they were set to start construction, a huge landslide happened in the middle of the night that blocked the highway for days. If it would have happened at rush hour, tons of people would have died. Ultimately, it was deemed unsafe territory to build on, so it remains empty, except for all the bike trails through the area. But no one ever rides during nighttime. I guess the people who died there didn't want to be chilling underneath a Walmart's aisle 10. Story 4. I live in Romania, and as a kid, the most common legend was the black ambulance that would steal kids and harvest their organs, and that kids' bodies were to be found a few days later, abandoned in a field with some money for the funeral. Also, in my town, our parents would never let us go to the cinema because there was this legend about a man who wound up putting infected needles on the seats. Story 5. It's not really a known creepy urban legend, but in the 1800s, in the Aoyi Mountains in Idaho, there was a group of hunters staying in a cabin, and after failing to come back to their families, a search party was sent out to look for them. They found the cabin locked from the inside, with the window also locked from the inside. And they found all of the hunters dead with their heads crushed. No one knows who did it or how, but the incident repeated itself in like the 1970s or something. Story 6. We have 3 mysterious men in a car called the Guardians. Yes, that's what we call them, along Montana Highway 464. People have told experiences where they have car trouble, and 3 men in a car drive up and help them out. Other people talk about headlights that disappear in places where they shouldn't disappear. We also have a Native American in a jean jacket and jeans who materializes in front of cars before they can swerve out of the way. When the driver checks for a victim, no body is found. Story 7. Not my current area, but one of the primary schools I went to had a few trees in the back corner of the field with a mountain of dirt. There were rumors that it was haunted with horses. Of all things. There was one black horse that was supposedly evil, and if you sat under the trees and closed your eyes, you could hear the horses. It wasn't until I was older that I found out the school was built on an old racing ground, and it closed down after one of the jockeys poisoned a competitor's black horse. Story 8. There's one that I'm actually connected to. There was this friend I had in 3rd grade. He was cool, and we had a lot of the same interests. He always sat with me at lunch and played with me during recess. One day, he was acting weird. He said that we were bugs in his brain. I asked him if he was okay, but he never responded. I didn't see him at lunch or recess either. He didn't come to school for 3 days. So I asked the teacher what happened to him, and she just said, "It's not your business." I never saw him again. Afterwards, other kids in my class started making up bullshit stories about how he ran into the woods and drowned in the lake, or got kidnapped by an escaped convict. And as his friend, I was obviously very offended by these kids making horror stories out of this guy that I really cared about. Now, 10 years later, the kids in my town are still perpetuating these myths. I just think it's crazy that this generation of kids who were literally infants when this happened are still talking about it, like it's an urban myth. None of them know the true story, and neither do I. But they sure as hell don't know that I knew this kid who they believe these legends about. Story 9. It's a university urban legend here in the Philippines. There was a female college student that went to the female's restroom. In the cubicle, she can hear a female voice. The voice is saying something in Latin. I can't remember the exact words. Obviously, the female student was frightened and hurried to go back to the classroom. She then asked her professor what was the meaning of the word she heard from the restroom. The professor said, "Look up, look up." Story 10. Not really creepy, but there's one house in my hometown that is said to be haunted. There's a tray with a golden teapot on it, and the tray has scratch marks on it. That tray has been sitting in the same location for years, remaining completely untouched, and still to this day, no one has touched it. Some of my friends insist that it's haunted. There's also an urban legend about how an electrician, or someone with a similar job, fell off a ladder while setting up one of the lights in the middle school gym. His ghost is said to haunt the gym at night whenever the lights are turned off. That teapot thing reminds me of my childhood home. There's a teddy bear that can't be moved from the house. It used to really creep me out to go up to the attic. One day we found old World War II blackout blinds, a Navy chest, and gas masks and turtle shells. Of course, the reasonable explanation of the guy living there before us was in the Navy during World War II and just wanted the teddy kept there as a memento. Makes sense, but I wonder if over the years it'll evolve into a legend. May have to write a creepy note to accompany it. Story 11. We had one called Joey the Clown. Nearby is a disused Victorian railway, which has been transformed into a 20-ish mile path for people to walk, jog, cycle, etc., and links different parts of the city, just as the rail line would have. Before that, it was just disused and didn't have tarmac or anything, just mud and grass, and there were no gates in the side doors of the tunnels. The tunnels are really dark, and we used to hang around there when we were kids. We became aware of the urban legend of Joey the Clown, who was a lunatic who ran away from the circus, kidnapped a baby, and hung it by its feet upside down from one of the pipes above the tunnel, right into the path of an oncoming locomotive, which he also jumped in front of. Rumors still persist that people have seen Joey's ghost in the tunnels, and if you were brave enough to go in the tunnel at night, you would hear him laugh, hear a baby cry, and the sound of the locomotive. My mother used this to her advantage when I was a kid, though, by telling my sisters and I that Joey the Clown preys upon children who wear odd socks and who refuse to wear clean underwear. So of course, we'd all be wearing matching socks and make sure we had pristine underwear on when we ventured down to the old railway. Story 12. I'll have to roughly translate it from Arabic, so bear with me. We call it the caller. It is said that in the middle of the night, it calls your name and forces you to follow its voice until you reach a body of water. It then pulls you under by forcing water into every single hole in your body, no matter how small, and then of course drowning you. I think this was made up so kids don't go to swim at night. Hey, that's a thing in India too. In remote villages of West Bengal, they call it Nishi, night. Nishi Radak, the call of night, is a voice that calls your name, and in some variations of the story, knocks on your door late at night or early in the morning when it's dark. If you answer or open the door, you'll enter a trance and follow the voice to a nearby body of water, and it will drown you there. It is advised that you don't answer to your name being called or open the door without hearing someone calling or knocking at least 3 times. It's believed that if you don't answer immediately, the evil force loses its power and leaves. Story 13. Black Shucks. Big, black, ghostly, demonic dogs with glowing red eyes that are supposed to be omens of death. They generally appear on roads at night. There's apparently a few around town, and some drag chains too. Also, one is actually a bear, but I have no idea why we have a ghostly demonic bear, because we don't even have normal bears in this country. Story 14. A beggar homeless man in Barrie, Vermont. I've met him, but I can't remember his name. He was just a rough-looking 40-year-old guy that wasn't all there, and he would dance if you gave him any money. He was usually sort of out of it, but he wasn't drunk or anything. He may have just been mentally worn out from drugs. People in town insisted that while he stayed in the local shelter to sleep at night, his family was actually rich. They said he pretended like he was fried, and that he knew Shakespeare and was very smart. I heard he stayed in shelters to spite his family after an argument he had with his dad 20 years before about a mysterious death in the family. I can't remember the whack name he got, but the locals feared and respected him just by his reputation. I want to say it was the Dancing Daddy, or something similar. Story 15. Flathead Lake Monster. Flathead Lake in western Montana is the largest body of fresh water this side of the Great Lakes. 18 miles wide, 26 miles long, 400 plus feet deep. People have seen the film breach the surface, looking like the back of a serpent-type creature. My theory is there are some monstrous 25-foot-long sturgeons hiding out down there. But who knows? Story 16. There was this colonel who founded the town a couple hours south of my hometown in the 1700s. He had an affair with a young woman, and when she got pregnant, he kicked her out of town, and she raised their son alone for several years. When she came back and begged him for help raising their kid, he publicly declared her a witch and had her burned to death. After she was burned and they were taking her body away, her son tried to take her body from them so she could be buried on his property. He tried to pull her corpse from them by the leg, but it snapped off due to how scorched her body was. He took the leg and said it would be buried near his home. Before he left, however, he told the colonel, his biological father, that he hoped the colonel's memory would always be tainted by what he did to his former mistress. After the colonel died, a tomb was erected for him, but overnight, a leg-shaped stain appeared right on the face of it. People tried to remove the stain, but it wouldn't go away. Eventually, they just replaced the stone on the tomb entirely, only for a new, identical stain to appear in the exact same spot on the new stone. The stain is still there to this day, and it's a big tourist attraction in the area. Story 17. There is a large burial ground for people who know too much and are a liability, mostly drug rings, out on a part of the reservation that no police or tribal police have jurisdiction to be able to investigate. Unfortunately, I heard about it, and so did my friends in high school, and we thought it was just a legend. Well, last year, I learned it was real. I had a friend who got out of the ring and showed it to me. Story 18. The Huaqipo, also known as the Night Marchers, are the spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors who have been cursed to march the islands for eternity. The Night Marchers are said to march in a single line, often carrying torches and weapons while chanting and playing drums. To protect yourself, you must lie on the ground face down in respect. Otherwise, the Night Marchers will kill you, or so they say. Story 19. Rural Western Maryland. Been researching folklore for our class. We have a few, but here's one of my personal favorites. Legend of the Beansucker. The story of a man who wanted to scare a couple as they were coming home in a carriage, back in the late 1800s. He stuffed his mouth full of beans and jumped in front of their carriage. It was said the driver was angry, so he chased the man down the railroad tracks by the path, until the man, the bean guy, ran into an oncoming train. It was said that when they found the body, there was no head. Since then, people say you can hear the beansucker's head rolling around or find beans on the ground. Maybe not the creepiest, but there is evidence that the train part may have happened around that time, which makes the reality factor even more real. Story 20. I grew up in southern Utah near the Four Corners. In other words, Skinwalker Country. I have lots of creepy stories about them, both from my own experiences and the experiences of others. But chances are a lot of you guys wouldn't believe, and they probably belong to a different subreddit. However, the creepiest thing about them is that everyone, and I mean everyone, is scared of them. Most of the people in my town are farmers, and overall pretty pragmatic people who aren't quick to believe or make up ghost stories. And yet, whenever I would ask an adult, what are skinwalkers, growing up, the answer I always got was a very serious, we don't talk about skinwalkers. Whether you believe in them or not, you have to admit that the ubiquity of that attitude in my hometown is pretty weird. Story 21. My high school had a few. It was a convent Catholic boarding school before becoming a high school. On my first day of school, my grade was brought on tours of the school by older students. Here are some of the stories I remember. When you enter the school from its main entrance to access the reception desk, you need to pass a statue of the Virgin Mary. Behind the statue, there is a rope. It was said that one of the nuns committed suicide with that exact rope. Outside the front of the school, there is a well and fountain that was no longer in use. The well was barred up and it was impossible to see what was down there. It was said that there was a girl who fell down the well, and the nuns had no way of getting her out. Since she died, the well had been sealed shut. The teachers' offices, which students were prohibited from entering unless given permission, were on the top floor of the school. It was said that you could see or hear ghosts of nuns who used to live there. That space used to be where the nuns slept. Another story is from a place that I worked at. Prior to becoming a store, it was a garage. The owner of the garage committed suicide on the property. Many people on different occasions mentioned hearing or seeing his ghost in the basement. Story 22. There's an abandoned mental asylum near where I used to live. People would of course say it's haunted and dare one another to go there at night. But the weird thing is, it draws people in. If you find yourself driving late at night, you might end up driving on the grounds of the asylum out of nowhere. This happened to me and my mom once. Somehow we got off at the wrong exit, several exits from our normal exits, and wound up on the grounds of the asylum. Shouldn't even be possible. There are gates that are supposed to be closed and locked. I remember my mom and I were freaked out, and for a second, I thought I saw faces looking out from the windows of the asylum, lights flickering on and off. We managed to find our way out through the main gate shortly after. Story 23. In a neighboring town, there lies a tree known as the Devil's Tree. It has no leaves and never grows leaves. It has been dead for years and still hasn't fallen. It was the site of many lynchings back in the day and is said to be connected to a gateway to hell itself. Snow melts around the tree, and people have tried taking the tree down before, to no avail. It is said that anyone who disrespects the tree in any way meets a gruesome fate. One such instance was of an 18-year-old football player who was out with his buddies when he thought it would be funny to piss on the tree. As they left, he floored it down the road, and his headlights went out, causing him to crash, and he lost his life. I don't know about the stories of the tree, but I've seen it. It's real. Snow never goes around it, and it stands to this day, dead as dead could be. It's the only tree in a large open field, and many question why it hasn't been taken down, only to be reminded of why. Do you know what kind of tree it is? In Irish folklore, any tree standing alone in a field is said to be a possible home to the Fae, and thus should be avoided, but especially if it's a hawthorn. And yeah, they can rain down holy hell if you F with their house. Story 24. Recently, on a local Facebook group about my and the neighboring village, there have been rumors of a dancing man. Only a couple of people have seen him, but they say he wears an old gas mask and black clothes, and can be found dancing at night on the beach, or can be seen walking the hill in a groovy stride. Also, he disappears when people look away and then look back.